The other day, Donald Trump held a press conference, his first since winning the election, and among other things, he said this about the United States Postal Service.
Well, there is talk about the Postal Service being taken private. You do know that. Not the worst idea I've ever heard. It really isn't. You know, it's a lot different today with between Amazon and UPS and FedEx and all the things that you didn't have. But there is talk about that. It's an idea that a lot of people have liked for a long time. We're looking at it.
So in that clip, Trump says that privatizing the Postal Service is not the worst idea he's ever heard, leaving aside his historically terrible judgment when it comes to determining what is a good idea and what is a bad idea. I want to say that for my part, I am not going to engage in that kind of hyperbole. It would be tempting to sit here and say, in response to Trump saying that, well, actually, I think privatizing the Postal Service is the worst idea I've ever heard. It's not technically the worst idea I've ever heard. I'm sure there are way worse ideas. I'm quite sure Donald Trump and the people who are going to be working with him in this incoming administration are going to have even worse ideas than that. But it's still a really, really bad idea to privatize the Postal Service. Trump cites a couple of different private parcel carriers as sort of his excuse for why he thinks privatizing the Postal Service is a good idea. He says, well, you have so many options now that people didn't have years and years ago. Now we have Amazon and we have UPS and we have FedEx, et cetera, et cetera. Here's the difference between the United States Postal Service and those private parcel carriers like FedEx and UPS and Amazon. The Postal Service is a public service. And it's not just any public service, it's a constitutionally mandated public service. The federal government is required by the United States Constitution to deliver the mail to the people of the United States. And one thing that means is that Trump does not have the power to just, with the stroke of a pen, privatize the Postal Service. He doesn't have the power to do that. He might think he does, because he doesn't actually know how anything works. And a lot of his supporters might think he does because they don't know how anything works either. But Trump, as president, does not have the power unilaterally to just say, we're privatizing the Postal Service. There, it's privatized. He can't do that, which is good for us. But the fact that he wants to, the fact that he is even willing to entertain the idea of it is, to me, further evidence of one of the fundamental differences in philosophy between folks like me on the progressive side, Democrats, liberals, leftists, etc., all of us sort of over here on this side, and Republicans and conservatives and people on Trump's side. And the difference is this. Republicans, at a very basic level, I don't think really believe in the concept of public service. They're always looking for an angle to make money. They think that government's job is to generate profit for people. They think that the government is a business. They say this openly, and they have said this for decades and decades and decades. If you ran a business like they run the government, that why you'd go out of business. Or they turn it around the other way and say, it's time somebody ran this government like a business, right? They have that mindset. Government should be run like a business. Government should operate like a business. Government should have the same priorities as a business. Businesses are not public services. Businesses are profit-making entities. And they do provide services for people, often. Sometimes it's a product, sometimes it's a service, it's something, but it's in exchange for money. It's a profit-making enterprise. It's not done for the good of the public. The reason why something like the Postal Service is so important, even with all of these private options now available, is because delivering the mail, even in today's day and age where so many things are electronic and we don't really write paper letters to each other anymore, we communicate online and all of this, physical mail, delivering the mail, delivering letters and packages to people's houses or people's offices or people's whatever, is still a vital part of our society. And you really don't want society to get to a point where there is no public option when it comes to delivering the mail, where there is no constitutionally mandated government postal service that is required as a public service to deliver the mail to the people. The post office delivers mail to everybody. If you live in a rural area where there is not easy access for an Amazon truck or a FedEx truck or a UPS truck, where it is not profitable for them to serve your area, the post office delivers to you. And in fact, a lot of times that's literally what happens. A lot of times when you order something and it is shipped via FedEx or via UPS or via Amazon, if it would cost them too much to deliver it to your house, to the final destination, the last leg of the journey, they let the post office carry it the rest of the way. Because the post office is required to do it, and the post office will get your package to you. It doesn't matter if you live in the middle of nowhere. If your address is on that package and it has been sent to you and it has the proper postage attached, some postal worker will deliver that package to you. That means if something is sent to you through the post office, unless there is some extraordinary circumstance that prevents that package from not making it, it will make it to your doorstep or to your post office box or wherever it's supposed to go. The post office will do that. Amazon won't, not all by itself. FedEx won't, not all by itself. UPS won't, not all by itself. They are businesses. They are not public services. The Postal Service is a public service. It's not supposed to make money. Now, it's required to fund itself thanks to the postal reforms that were implemented in the 1970s, and there's all kinds of problems with those. The Postal Reform Act in the early 70s did accomplish some good things. It did give postal workers the right to collectively bargain, which they didn't legally have before. That was great. But it also reorganized the Postal Service. It ended the United States Postal Department as a department of the federal government, and it reorganized it into the Postal Service, which is still part of the federal government, but it's more freestanding and it has the obligation to self-fund. So since all of those reforms, the Postal Service does need to make money to an extent. It does need to be able to pay its own bills, so to speak. But philosophically speaking, the Postal Service is not there to generate a profit. The Postal Service is not there to make money for anybody. It's there to deliver the mail. That's why it exists. It's a public service. And Republicans, I think, fundamentally don't understand this. It doesn't fit within their profit motive-dominated worldview where everything is transactional, where everything is about making as much money as you can and spending as little money as you can get away with spending. Like that seems to be how they see virtually everything. And the idea of a public service operating for the public good, where profit and revenue generation is not its number one priority, is just alien to them. They don't get it, and they don't support it. And that's why they look at the post office and they say, look, well, we could probably run the post office much more efficiently if it were a private business, if we ran it more like they run Amazon or UPS or FedEx, right? Because the public service part of it doesn't even enter into their mind. They don't value that. They don't get that. And they don't care. Republicans don't care about the people who depend on public services like the post office. Republicans, like Donald Trump, don't support public libraries. They don't get it. They don't care. Republicans, like Donald Trump, want to replace public schools with private schools. That's why they support things like vouchers. That's why Trump has said, in addition to musing at that press conference about wanting to privatize the Postal Service, he has also said repeatedly and very, very prominently during his presidential campaign that he wants to end the federal Department of Education. He just wants to get rid of it because he doesn't value public education. Republicans in general don't value public education because public education, like the Postal Service, is a public service. Public schools aren't there to make money for anybody. Public schools are there to educate the people of the United States because It's a public good. That's why it exists. And those are things that only government, in the society that we have, the way we have chosen to organize our society, where everything is about how much money you can make and everything is profit driven. And if you want to survive, you need to make enough money or have enough money that you can then trade for the basic essentials of life. And if you are not one of the fortunate few who was born sitting on a gigantic pile of money that you could never spend away in your entire lifetime if you tried, if you're one of most of us working stiffs, if you are not able to trade your labor for enough money to live on, you're kind of screwed. That's the situation that we are in. That's the nature of our capitalist society. And within that context, the existence of public services, publicly funded, taxpayer-funded, government-supported public services that exist not to make money, not to make profit, but to carry out necessary things for the good of the people of this country, the existence of those sorts of services is absolutely vital. The Postal Service should continue to exist as a public service, just like public schools should continue to exist as a public service, just like public free libraries should continue to exist as a public service, just like, by the way, social welfare programs should continue to exist as a public service and should be greatly expanded and far more generously funded with far fewer strings and obstacles and loopholes that people need to jump through in order to get the money that they need. Because as long as we choose to live in a society like this, that is dominated by capitalism, that is dominated by the profit motive, where a fortunate few hoard so much of the money and resources and prosperity at the top, and so many people in the middle struggle to get by, and so many people at the bottom have nothing, it is morally reprehensible to suggest cutting public services and depriving people who need them of those services, while the people who are saving money from the cutting of those services, the people at the top who want for nothing, are the ones who benefit. It is a moral outrage. Instead of cutting funding for these programs, instead of cutting funding for libraries and public education and considering doing away with the federal education department altogether, instead of thinking about privatizing the post office, these institutions and many more like them should be far more robustly funded than they are by our tax dollars, and not our tax dollars, their tax dollars, the ones who have the money, the ones who have collected the vast majority of the wealth in this country up there at the top, who have more than they will ever need, who have more than their children or their grandchildren or their great-grandchildren would ever need to live comfortably, even if they never earned another cent. Those people should be the ones to pay for the generous funding of programs and institutions and agencies and services that work to the betterment of our society, that work toward the needs of those people in our society that are the most at need. And if we don't do that, and if we allow Republicans like Donald Trump and all of his supporters and all of his allies and all of the people that are going to work with him in this incoming administration, if we allow them to take away public services like the post office, if we allow them to privatize something that exists for the public good, and they take that public service away so that, yet again, a very small number of people can profit from it, rather than all of us profiting from it by enjoying the service it provides. If we allow that to happen, then in a very real and very dark and very, very dire sense, we will all be getting exactly what we paid for.